She sat there like a statue. Not a tear, not a scream, not a single objection. Her husband, Preston, was demanding everything. The house in the Hamptons, the accounts in the Caymans, and the company she had spent 10 years building from the ground up. He thought her silence was surrender. He thought he had won. He was wrong. Her silence wasn't a retreat, it was a countdown. And when the mysterious man in the charcoal suit in the back row finally stood up, he didn't just end the marriage. He ended Preston's entire existence. This is the story of the quietest divorce in New York history, and the loudest aftermath. The air in courtroom 302 of the New York State Supreme Court smelled of lemon polish and old despair. It was the smell of endings. Preston Galloway adjusted his silk tie, a Hermes print he'd bought in Paris 3 weeks ago with his mistress, Tiffany. He sat with the posture of a man who owned the room, the building, and the city skyline visible through the smudge-proof windows. He leaned over to his lawyer, a shark named Arthur Nathan from the firm Cravath, Swain and Moore, and whispered, "Look at her. Pathetic." Across the aisle, Madeleine Galloway sat alone. She had no team of paralegals. She had no stack of files. She had a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept since the Bush administration, and she had a small, battered notebook resting on her lap. She was 34, but today she looked younger, smaller. She wore a simple navy dress, not the Chanel suits Preston insisted she wear when they hosted galas at the Met. Her hands were folded on the table. She was perfectly still. "Your Honor," Arthur Nathan boomed, standing up. He was a man who charged $2,000 an hour to destroy lives. "My client, Mr. Galloway, has been more than generous. We are offering Miss Galloway the apartment in Queens and a monthly stipend of $4,000 for the next 18 months. Considering Mr. Galloway is the sole proprietor and creative genius behind Galloway Tech, and considering Ms. Galloway has not been employed in 6 years, we find this equitable." The judge, Honorable Harold P. Henderson, looked over his spectacles. He was tired. It was 3 p.m. on a Friday. He wanted to go home. "Does the defendant have a counter-proposal?" Madeleine didn't move. She didn't look at Preston, who was currently smirking at Tiffany, who was sitting in the second row wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. Madeleine's court-appointed lawyer, a man named Mr. Finkel, cleared his throat nervously. No, Your Honor. My client. She hasn't given me anything to work with. She accepts the terms." Preston laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound. "See? She knows her place." That was when the door at the back of the courtroom creaked. It wasn't a loud noise, but in the dead silence of Madeleine's surrender, it sounded like a gunshot. A man walked in. He was tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him with the kind of precision that suggested it was bespoke, likely from Anderson and Shepard on Savile Row. He didn't look like a lawyer. He didn't look like a witness. He looked like a predator entering a petting zoo. He didn't sit in the front. He didn't approach the bench. He walked calmly to the very back row, the gallery seats usually reserved for bored law students or family members. He sat down, crossed his legs, and rested his hands on a silver-headed cane. Preston turned around, annoyed. "Who the hell is that?" "Ignore him," Arthur Nathan whispered, though the lawyer was frowning. "Probably a reporter. We'll have the NDAs ready by 5. The judge banged his gavel. "Order. Mr. Galloway, restrain yourself. Ms. Galloway, I need a verbal confirmation. Do you accept the terms of this divorce decree, stripping you of all claims to Galloway Tech, the marital assets, and the intellectual property therein?" Madeleine finally looked up. Her eyes were green, sharp, and terrifyingly clear. There was no sadness in them, only a cold mathematical calculation. She looked past her husband, past the mistress, past the judge. Her eyes locked onto the man in the back row. The man in the charcoal suit gave a barely perceptible nod. Madeline turned to the judge. "No, Your Honor, I do not." Preston slammed his hand on the table. "Oh, come on, you just said—" "I didn't say anything," Madeline said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. "My lawyer spoke. I stayed silent. Because I was waiting." "Waiting for what?" Judge Henderson asked, his patience thinning. "For the wire transfer to clear," Madeline said. Preston blinked. "What wire transfer?" "You have $40 in your checking account, Maddie. I checked this morning." "Not my account," Madeline said, standing up for the first time. She picked up the battered notebook. "Yours, Preston. Or rather, the company's." "This is absurd." Arthur Nathan stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, the defendant is stalling. Galloway Tech is a private entity owned 100% by my client." Actually, a deep baritone voice resonated from the back of the room. The man in the charcoal suit stood up. He didn't shout, but his voice had the weight of a cathedral bell. "That is legally incorrect as of— let me check my watch. 3 minutes ago." Preston spun around in his chair. "Who are you? Get out of my divorce hearing." The man walked down the center aisle. His steps were slow, rhythmic. As he passed the gallery, Tiffany shrank back in her seat, sensing a shift in atmospheric pressure. "Your Honor," the man said, stopping at the gate that separated the public from the court. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He didn't hand it to the bailiff. He flicked it onto the defense table, right in front of Preston. Preston looked at the card. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock. Embossed in black ink were 3 words: Sebastian Cole, Managing Partner, Vanguard and Blackwood Capital. Preston's face went pale. Vanguard and Blackwood. They weren't just a bank. They were the bank. They were the entity that bought countries when they went bankrupt. They were the real private name, whispered at dinners at Le Bernardin and Per Se. "Mr. Cole," Judge Henderson said, his eyebrows shooting up, "to what do we owe the pleasure? This is a family court matter." "It was," Sebastian Cole said, his eyes fixing on Preston with a look of mild amusement. "Now, it's a corporate acquisition matter. You see, Mr. Galloway believes he is divorcing his wife and leaving her with nothing. But there was a clause in your original incorporation documents, Preston. Do you remember? The Founder's Protection Clause?" Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I see you don't," Sebastian continued. "It states that if the primary patent holder, the creator of the Galloway algorithm, declares a vote of no confidence, they can liquidate their controlling interest to a third party without board approval." "I'm the primary patent holder," Preston screamed, standing up. "It's my name on the building." "It's your name on the building," Madeline said quietly. "But it's my name on the patent, filed in 2014, before we were married, under my maiden name, Madeline Vance." Preston froze. Sebastian Cole smiled, a shark baring its teeth. "And Miss Vance, excuse me, the soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Galloway, just sold her 51% controlling stake in Galloway Tech to my firm, for the sum of—" He pulled a folded check from his pocket. $1. The courtroom went silent. $1? Preston whispered. "You sold $1 billion company for $1. "I didn't do it for the money, Preston," Madeline said, finally looking him in the eye. "I did it to make sure that when you walk out of here, you don't own the company. You don't own the house. You don't even own the tie around your neck, because that was charged to the corporate card, which I just cancelled." To understand the sheer violence of that moment in the courtroom, you have to understand the silence that preceded it. You have to understand the 5 years of hell Madeleine Galloway had endured. They met at MIT. That was the part Preston always left out of the Forbes interviews. He liked to tell the world he was a self-made genius who dropped out to change the world. The truth was, he dropped out because he was failing Calculus 3. Madeleine was the TA who tried to tutor him. Madeleine was brilliant, introverted, and painfully shy. Preston was charismatic, loud, and handsome in a way that made you forgive his mediocrity. He courted her with the same aggression he used to close deals later in life. He brought her coffee, he praised her code, he told her she was the only person who truly saw the future. By the time they graduated, well, she graduated. He watched. They were a team. Or so she thought. The Galloway algorithm was originally called Project Echo. Madeleine wrote the core code on a beat-up Dell laptop in a studio apartment in Cambridge. It was designed to optimize logistics for shipping companies, unsexy, boring, and worth billions. Preston saw the potential immediately. "We need to pitch this, Maddie, but you know how these VCs are. They don't listen to quiet girls in cardigans. Let me be the face. You be the brain. We'll be partners, 50-50, always." She believed him. Why wouldn't she? She loved him. They married in 2018 at the Plaza Hotel. It was a lavish affair. Madeleine wanted something small, but Preston insisted. "It's about branding, babe," he'd said, checking his reflection in the mirror while she struggled with her zipper. The shift happened slowly. First, it was the meetings. "You don't need to be there, Maddie. It's just boring finance stuff. You stay home and work on the update." Then it was the credit. "I just accepted the Innovator of the Year award," he told her one night, tossing a glass trophy on the counter. "I mentioned my team. That includes you." Then came the erasure. 6 months ago, Madeleine found the emails. Not just one or two, but hundreds. Emails between Preston and Tiffany Saunders, the 22-year-old PR intern he'd hired. "She's a drag, Tiff. She's just dead weight now. I'm the one who built this. I'm going to cut her loose once the IPO hits. She won't know what hit her." And then, the kicker. An email to his lawyer, Arthur Nathan. "Make sure the prenup holds. I want her walking away with nothing but the clothes on her back. She's too weak to fight back." He was right about one thing. She was introverted. She hated conflict. But he mistook her silence for weakness. He forgot that she was an engineer. And engineers don't get mad. They troubleshoot. The night she found the emails, she didn't scream. She didn't slash his tires. She went to her safe, took out her original patent filings, documents Preston thought were long lost, and she made a phone call. She didn't call a divorce lawyer. She called the one man Preston feared more than anyone, Sebastian Cole. They met in a diner in New Jersey, far away from the prying eyes of Manhattan gossip columns. Sebastian arrived in a Bentley, but sat in a vinyl booth and ordered black coffee. "Mrs. Galloway," Sebastian had said, looking at the patent documents she slid across the table. "You realize what you have here? You own the foundational code for half the logistics industry." "I know," she said. "If you sue him, you'll be in court for 10 years. He has the money to bleed you dry." "I don't want to sue him," Madeleine said. "I want to delete him." Sebastian smiled then. It was a genuine smile, rare for a man who spent his life dismantling corporations. "What are you proposing?" "I sell you my rights, all of it. The Project Echo IP, the retroactive licensing, everything. It gives you controlling interest over Galloway Tech immediately." "And your price?" Sebastian asked, pulling out a checkbook. $1, she said, "and one condition, which is, you show up to my divorce hearing, and you deliver the news yourself." Back in the courtroom, The reality of that diner meeting was crashing down on Preston Galloway. "This is fraud!" Preston shrieked. His composure was gone. He looked sweaty and desperate. "Judge, you can't allow this. She conspired against me." Judge Henderson was reading the document Sebastian had handed him. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at Arthur Nathan. "Mr. Nathan, did you or did you not verify the chain of title on the original IP for your client's company?" Arthur Nathan was flipping through his own files, his hands shaking. We assumed," Mr. Galloway assured us. "Assumption is the mother of all screw-ups, Counselor," Sebastian said smoothly. "The Patent Office records are public. Madeline Vance filed 3 years prior to the incorporation of Galloway Tech. She never assigned the rights to the company. She granted a license, a revocable license." Sebastian turned to Preston. "And as the new owner of the IP, I am hereby revoking that license, effective immediately. Which means, Preston, your company is currently selling illegal software. I've already notified the SEC and your major shareholders. The stock... Oh, let me check." Sebastian pulled out a sleek black smartphone. "Down 40% in the last 10 minutes. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want your resignation." Preston looked at Tiffany. She was already typing on her phone, probably calling an Uber. She wouldn't be going to Paris with him. "Maddie," Preston stammered, turning to his wife. His tone changed instantly. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, wheedling tone. "Maddie, baby, look at what you're doing. We're a team, you and me. We can fix this. Just tell him it's a mistake. We can work it out. I'll fire Tiffany, I swear. Just don't do this." Madeline looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, but she didn't feel the satisfaction she expected. She just felt relief. "I'm not doing this to you, Preston," she said. "You did this to yourself when you decided I was disposable." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, since my financial status has changed, considering I have sold my primary asset for $1, I would like to amend my statement. I do not require spousal support. I do, however, require that Mr. Galloway vacate my apartment by tonight." "Your apartment?" Preston spat. "I bought that penthouse." "With company funds," Sebastian interjected, "which legally now belong to the entity I control. And since I am leasing the property to Ms. Vance, you are trespassing." The judge banged the gavel. A small smile played on his lips. "Court is adjourned. Mr. Galloway, I suggest you find a hotel and a bankruptcy lawyer." The double doors of the New York State Supreme Court burst open, not by force, but by the sheer pressure of the noise waiting outside. Inside, it had been a surgical dismantling. Outside, it was a feeding frenzy. Sebastian Cole had not just bought a company. He had orchestrated a media event. Word had leaked, undoubtedly via one of Sebastian's perfectly timed press releases, before the gavel had even hit the wood. When Preston Galloway stumbled out onto the wide stone steps of the courthouse, he was blinded by the strobe effect of 100 camera flashes. The questions hit him like physical blows. "Mr. Galloway, is it true you defrauded investors about the origins of your algorithm?" "Preston, Bloomberg is reporting Galloway Tech stock is down 60% and trading has been halted. Comment? Did your wife really sell the company out from under you for a single dollar?" Preston looked like a man suffering from sudden onset shell shock. His Hermes tie was loosened, his hair disordered from running his hands through it in the elevator. He blinked against the glare, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. "No," he stammered into a thicket of microphones thrust in his face. "It's a misunderstanding, a clerical error. My wife is... She's confused. We're working it out." A reporter from CNBC, a woman with sharp eyes and zero patience, held up her phone. The screen displayed a live stock ticker. It was a sea of red, with Galloway plummeting toward the bottom of the screen. The board just issued a statement, Preston. They've appointed an interim CEO. You're out. Care to respond to the rumor that the SEC is already opening an investigation into insider trading based on the IP fraud? Preston looked around wildly for Arthur Nathan, his shark of a lawyer, but Arthur was nowhere to be seen. Sharks, after all, know when there's too much blood in the water, even for them. Instead, Preston's eyes landed on Tiffany. His mistress, usually perfectly put together in designer clothes he had paid for, looked terrified. She was trying to shrink behind a concrete pillar, her large sunglasses shielding her face from the cameras. "Tiffany!" Preston yelled, pushing through the reporters, desperation clawing at his throat. "Tiffany, baby, call the car. We need to get to the Hamptons' house. We need to regroup." He grabbed her arm. It was a mistake. Tiffany whipped around, ripping her arm out of his grasp with a ferocity that surprised even the paparazzi. The cameras swung toward the new drama. "Don't touch me!" she hissed, her voice loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Tiff, what are you doing? It's me. We need to go." She pulled her sunglasses down, her eyes cold and hard. "Go where, Preston? The Hamptons' house? The one the bank is probably putting a padlock on right now? You're toxic. You're done." "But Paris," he mumbled, the reality slowly seeping in. "We were going to Paris." "I'm going to Paris," Tiffany said, adjusting her oversized tote bag. "You're going to Rikers Island if half of what these reporters are saying is true. I knew you were an asshole, Preston. I didn't know you were a fraud. And I definitely didn't know you were broke." She turned to a waiting yellow taxi, not an Uber Black, not a limo, and dove inside. As the cab pulled away, she didn't even look back. The reporters smelled blood. They closed in tighter on Preston. He was hyperventilating now, spinning in circles, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. That was when the main court doors opened again. A hush fell over the crowd, a sudden vacuum of silence that was more jarring than the noise. Madeleine Galloway stepped out. She hadn't changed her simple navy dress. She hadn't fixed her hair. But the woman who had walked into the courtroom, looking small and defeated, was gone. In her place was a woman radiating an icy calm. She stood tall, her chin up, holding the battered notebook against her chest like a shield. Beside her stood Sebastian Cole. He looked like a panther in a charcoal suit, his silver-headed cane tapping lightly on the stone step. The reporters seemed unsure of whether to attack or bow. Sebastian Cole had a reputation that made grown editors weep. You didn't ambush Sebastian Cole. You waited for him to speak. He didn't speak. He simply placed a hand gently on the small of Madeleine's back and guided her down the steps. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. It was a masterclass in non-verbal power dynamics. No shouting, no shoving, just an absolute assumption that the way would be cleared. At the curb, a Bentley Mulsanne, black as an oil spill, idled. A driver in livery held the rear door open. Before she got in, Madeleine paused. She looked over the heads of the reporters, directly at Preston, who was standing alone on the periphery, shivering despite the mild afternoon temperature. Their eyes met. Preston looked at her with a mixture of hatred and profound confusion. He still couldn't process that the quiet coder he'd exploited for years had just executed him on public television. Madeleine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just gave him a slight nod, a final acknowledgement of a transaction completed, and slipped into the leather interior of the Bentley. Sebastian followed, the heavy door thudding shut, sealing them off from the madness. As the car pulled away, gliding seamlessly into the Manhattan traffic, the camera flashes reflected off the tinted windows, illuminating Preston Galloway, alone on the sidewalk, the king of nothing. The silence inside the Bentley was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of a diffused bomb. Madeline leaned her head back against the soft leather headrest and closed her eyes. Her adrenaline was crashing. Her hands, which had been rock steady in the courtroom, were beginning to tremble slightly in her lap. "Breathe." Sebastian's deep voice came from beside her. She opened her eyes. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the city blur past the window. He looked utterly relaxed, as if dismantling a billion-dollar empire in an afternoon was just a Tuesday. "Did you have to be so brutal?" Madeline asked quietly. "The reporters. Tiffany." It was a circus. Sebastian turned his head slowly. His eyes were a strange color, somewhere between gray and blue, like frozen slate. "I didn't make Tiffany leave him, Madeline. She did that math herself. And the reporters? Preston courted them for years when they were building him up. He can't complain now that they're there for the demolition. I merely ensured the timing was maximized for impact." "Impact," she repeated. "Is that what this is to you? A show?" "Business is theater," Sebastian said, tapping his fingers on the silver head of his cane. Preston forgot his lines. You remembered yours. The car didn't head toward Queens, where her sad little temporary apartment was. It headed uptown, toward Central Park South. It pulled up in front of one of those limestone buildings where the doormen wear white gloves and know the names of every resident's dog. "This isn't my stop," Madeline said. "Your apartment in Queens is currently surrounded by 3 news vans," Sebastian said, "and Preston is desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. You're not safe there tonight." He didn't wait for her agreement. The doorman opened the door. "Good evening, Mr. Cole, and Mrs. Galloway." "Ms. Vance?" Sebastian corrected smoothly. They took a private elevator directly to the penthouse. The doors opened into a space that was larger than the entire floor of the office building Madeline used to work in. It was all glass walls overlooking the park, minimalist Italian furniture, and modern art that looked incredibly expensive. It was cold, beautiful, and impersonal. Much like Sebastian himself, he walked to a wet bar made of polished black marble. "Vodka martini, very dry, lemon twist. Correct?" Madeline blinked. "How did you know?" "I do my due diligence," he said, dropping ice into a silver shaker. "Before I invested $1 in your intellect, I knew where you went to kindergarten, your GPA in every semester at MIT, and your preferred drink after a crisis." He handed her the chilled glass. It was perfect. She took a sip, the alcohol burning pleasantly, grounding her. She walked to the window, looking out over the darkening expanse of Central Park. The city lights were coming on below. Somewhere down there, Preston was probably trying to figure out which credit card hadn't been declined yet. She expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she just felt hollow. "It's okay to mourn him, you know," Sebastian said. He was standing just behind her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something subtle, like cedarwood and rain. "I'm not mourning him," Madeline said, her breath fogging the glass slightly. "I mourn the time I wasted. I mourn the person I thought he was. I feel stupid, Sebastian. How did I let him steal 5 years of my life? How did I let him steal my mind?" "Because you are a builder, Madeline. Builders look at what can be created. People like Preston, they are parasites. They look at what can be taken. They are very good at mimicking creators until they have what they want. You weren't stupid. You were just optimized for a different function." She turned to face him. Up close, he was even more intimidating. There were lines around his eyes that suggested he didn't sleep much, and an intensity in his gaze that made her want to look away. Yet she couldn't. "Why did you do it?" she asked. the question that had been plaguing her since that diner meeting. I know the IP is valuable. I know you'll make billions licensing it properly. But you enjoyed today. You enjoyed destroying him personally. Why? Sebastian took a slow sip of his own drink. He seemed to be debating how much to tell her. 20 years ago, he started, his voice dropping an octave. I was a young analyst at a firm not unlike Vanguard and Blackwood. I worked for a man who was very much like Preston. Charismatic, loud, empty. He paused, swirling the liquid in his glass. He took a financial model I built, something revolutionary at the time, and he put his name on it. He made partner. He made millions. And when the model developed a flaw that I had warned him about, he blamed me. I was blacklisted from Wall Street for 3 years. I lost everything. Madeline watched him. The mask of easy indifference had slipped, just a fraction, revealing a deep, old scar beneath. What happened to him? She asked. Sebastian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I eventually clawed my way back. I built my own firm. And 5 years ago, when his firm was over-leveraged in subprime mortgage bonds, I bought their debt. I called in the loans. I dismantled his company piece by piece, sold the furniture, and fired him in the lobby of the building he used to own. He took another step toward her. I despise thieves, Madeline. Intellectual thieves most of all. When you came to me with those patent documents, I didn't just see a good deal. I saw a pattern repeating. Preston Galloway is a mediocrity, parading as a genius on the backs of people like you. And I enjoy correcting the market's errors. Madeline felt a shiver run down her spine. He was a monster, she realized. But for right now, he was her monster. So what happens now? She asked. The market is corrected. Preston is ruined. Do I just take my $1 and go? Sebastian set his glass down on a marble pedestal table with a sharp click. No, he said. That was just the demolition phase. Now we build. Galloway Tech is dead. But the Echo algorithm is alive, and it belongs to Vanguard and Blackwood. I need someone who understands it better than anyone else to run the new division I'm creating to license it. He held out a hand. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a business proposition, cold and hard as steel. Madeline Vance, I'm offering you the position of Chief Technology Officer of the newly formed Echo Logistics. The starting salary is 7 figures, plus stock options that will make your previous life with Preston look like poverty. Do we have a deal? Madeline looked at his hand. Then she looked out the window at the city that had just chewed up her husband. She thought about her quiet apartment, her stolen code, and the 5 years she'd spent in the shadows. She put her drink down and took his hand. His grip was firm, electric. Deal, she said. Good, Sebastian said. Get some sleep. Tomorrow the real war starts. Preston is down, but rats are most dangerous when they're cornered. He's not done with you yet. Preston Galloway sat in a motel room in New Jersey that smelled of stale smoke and regret. It was a far cry from the penthouse overlooking Central Park, but when your assets are frozen by the SEC and your credit cards are declined at McDonald's, you take what you can get. His phone buzzed. It was Arthur Nathan, his former lawyer. Preston scrambled to answer. Arthur, tell me you found a loophole. Tell me we can sue. I'm calling to tell you to stop emailing me. Preston, Arthur's voice was clipped. My firm is representing the board now. We're cooperating with the federal investigation. If you contact me again, I'll file a restraining order. Oh, and good luck with the public defender. I hear they're overworked. The line went dead. Preston threw the phone against the wall. It cracked, but didn't shatter. Unlike his life. He paced the small room, his mind racing. He was a genius, wasn't he? That's what the magazines had said. Sure, Madeline wrote the code, but he sold it. He built the brand. She was nothing without him. She was just a calculator with legs. And Sebastian Cole, that arrogant prick. Preston stopped pacing. He looked at his reflection in the grimy mirror. He looked haggard, unshaven, eyes wild. "They think they've won," he whispered. "They think they can just erase me." He reached into his duffel bag, the only luggage he had managed to grab before the locks were changed, and pulled out a hard drive. It was an old backup, encrypted from 3 years ago. It didn't have the source code. Madeline was too careful with that. But it had something else. It had the blueprints to the server farm in upstate New York, where Galloway Tech, now Echo Logistics, housed its physical data. He couldn't get the company back, but he could make sure nobody else could have it either. He needed help. He needed someone who didn't care about SEC investigations or polite society. He picked up his cracked phone and dialed a number he had saved under Fixer. It was a contact he'd gotten from a shady investor years ago, just in case. "Yeah?" a voice rasped on the other end. "I need a job done," Preston said, his voice trembling slightly. "Not illegal, physical. I need to get into a facility in the Catskills, and I need to burn it to the ground." "That's expensive, Mr. Galloway," the voice said, recognizing him instantly. "And considering your current liquidity issues." "I have a stash," Preston lied. "Watches. Gold. Hidden in a safe deposit box the feds don't know about. I can pay you double. But it has to be tonight." There was a pause. "Meet me at the diner on Route 17 in an hour. Come alone." Meanwhile, in the glass tower in Manhattan, Madeline was drowning in success. The launch of Echo Logistics was the biggest tech news of the decade. Sebastian had rebranded everything overnight. The stock price of the holding company had skyrocketed. Madeline was being hailed as the hidden genius on every news channel, but she felt exposed. She was sitting in her new office, a corner suite that made Preston's old office look like a closet, staring at lines of code. "You're not focusing," Sebastian said from the doorway. He was wearing a different suit today, navy blue with a faint pinstripe. He looked irritatingly fresh. "It's hard to focus when every time I open a browser, I see my face," Madeline said, rubbing her temples. "Preston is still out there, Sebastian. He hasn't surrendered. I know him. He's a narcissist. He won't just fade away. We have security, Madeline. The best former Mossad agent's money can buy. He can't get within 500 feet of you." "It's not me I'm worried about," she said, tapping her screen. "It's the legacy, the code. It's my life's work. If he can't have it, he'll try to destroy it." Sebastian walked over to her desk. He looked at the screen. "The server farm? It's a fortress, Madeline. Biometric locks, armed guards, fire suppression systems that suck the oxygen out of the room in 10 seconds. He knows the override codes," Madeline said softly. "I gave them to him. Years ago, when we were first setting it up. He has a photographic memory for numbers, Sebastian. If he gets inside the control room, he can disable the cooling system. He can melt the cores. He can wipe everything." Sebastian's expression darkened. He pulled out his phone. "I'll double the guard detail at the facility." "No," Madeline said, standing up. She grabbed her coat. "I need to go there. I need to change the encryption manually on the physical terminal. It's the only way to lock him out permanently." "Absolutely not," Sebastian said, blocking her path. "It's too dangerous. If you're right, and he's planning something, that's exactly where he'll be." "That's why I have to go," Madeline said, her green eyes flashing. I spent 5 years hiding in the back row, Sebastian. I'm not hiding anymore. You bought the company, but I own the fight." Sebastian looked at her for a long moment. He saw the steel in her spine that Preston had never noticed. "Fine," he said, buttoning his jacket. "But you're not going alone, and we're taking the helicopter." The helicopter ride to the Catskills was tense. The sun had set, and the mountains were black shapes against a dark blue sky. When they landed on the helipad of the data center, the air was crisp and cold. The facility looked secure. Floodlights swept the perimeter. Guards in tactical gear patrolled the fence line. "See?" Sebastian said, shouting over the rotor wash. "Secure." But as they walked toward the main entrance, Madeline stopped. She sniffed the air. "Do you smell that?" she asked. Sebastian paused. "Smoke?" Suddenly the floodlights flickered and died. The entire facility plunged into darkness. "He's here," Madeline whispered. A siren began to wail, a low mechanical moan. "System failure. Cooling system offline. Core temperature rising." "He cut the power," Sebastian realized, grabbing Madeline's arm. The backups should have kicked in. He must have sabotaged the generator. "The servers will overheat in 15 minutes, Madeline said, her voice rising in panic. "If they melt, the data is gone. All of it. The algorithm, the backups, the history. It's a complete wipe." "Stay here with the pilot," Sebastian ordered, pulling a handgun from a holster beneath his jacket, a move that surprised Madeline, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "I'll handle this." "No," Madeline yelled. "You don't know the system. You can't reboot the cooling manually. I have to do it." She broke free from his grip and ran toward the dark building. "Madeline!" Sebastian shouted, cursing as he ran after her. They burst into the main corridor. The emergency red lights were pulsing, casting long, bloody shadows on the walls. It was hot inside, getting hotter by the second. The hum of the servers was growing louder, a high-pitched whine of machinery under stress. They reached the central control room. The door was blown open, the electronic lock shattered. Inside, Preston Galloway stood over the main console. He was holding a fire axe. He looked deranged, his shirt soaked in sweat, his eyes manic. Behind him, a man in a ski mask, the fixer, was pouring gasoline onto the server racks, visible through the glass partition. "Preston!" Madeline screamed. Preston spun around. He smiled, a jagged, broken expression. "Maddie!" he cheered, as if they were at a reunion. "You're just in time for the fireworks. I told you we were a team. If I go down, we all go down." "Put the axe down, Preston," Sebastian said, his voice calm, leveling his gun. "This is over. The police are 5 minutes out." 5 minutes is too long," Preston laughed. "The cores are at critical temperature. One swing at this main pipe, and the hydraulic coolant drains. Boom, the cloud evaporates." He raised the axe over a thick bundle of pipes, labeled liquid nitrogen coolant. "Don't do it, Preston," Madeline said, stepping forward, ignoring Sebastian's arm, trying to hold her back. "Think about what you're doing. This isn't just my code, it's your legacy too. You helped build this company." "I built it!" Preston screamed. "And you stole it! You and your rich boyfriend!" He swung the axe. Crack! The blade bit into the pipe. A hiss of freezing gas erupted. The temperature in the room began to spike wildly as the cooling pressure dropped. "Finish it!" Preston yelled to the man with the gasoline. The man in the mask pulled out a lighter. Sebastian didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet struck the lighter in the man's hand, shattering it and sending the man scrambling back in pain, clutching his hand. Preston roared and charged at Sebastian with the axe. Sebastian sidestepped with the grace of a dancer, using his cane to hook Preston's ankle. Preston crashed to the floor, the axe skittering away, but the pipe was leaking. The red warning lights were flashing rapidly. Critical failure imminent. "Madeline, fix the system!" Sebastian yelled, grappling with Preston on the floor. Preston was fighting with the strength of the insane, scratching and punching. Madeline ran to the console. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "Access denied! Access denied!" The computer droned. "He changed the root password!" she shouted. Preston, pinned beneath Sebastian, laughed, blood bubbling on his lip. "You'll never guess it, Maddie. It's not your birthday anymore." Madeline looked at the screen. She closed her eyes for a split second. She thought about Preston. Not the monster on the floor, but the man she had met 10 years ago. The insecure boy who needed to feel important. The narcissist who loved only one thing. She typed in a password. "Preston is God, so one. Access granted." She slammed the enter key. "Initiate emergency flush." A massive whoosh echoed through the building as the backup coolant reserves flooded the system. The high-pitched whine of the servers began to descend in pitch. The temperature gauge on the screen stopped climbing and began to drop. The man in the mask, seeing the tide turn and his hand bleeding, bolted for the exit. Sebastian finally subdued Preston, pinning his arms behind his back and pressing his face into the linoleum. "It's done," Madeline said, slumping against the console, breathing hard. "The system is stable." Preston stopped struggling. He lay there, defeated, listening to the hum of the machine that had beaten him. "You guessed it," he whispered into the floor. "You're predictable, Preston," Madeline said, looking down at him with pity, not hate. "You always were." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The police had arrived. Sebastian stood up, straightening his tie, though his suit was rumpled and dusty. He looked at Madeline. There was soot on her face and fear in her eyes, but she was standing tall. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am now," she said. He walked over to her, avoiding Preston on the floor. He took her hand, her trembling, soot-stained hand, and kissed the knuckles. "Remind me," Sebastian said, "never to play poker against you." The trial of Preston Galloway was not the high-stakes legal thriller the tabloids had promised. It was, much to Preston's horror, a boring and clinical dissection of his failures. The prosecution didn't need to be theatrical. They had the server logs. They had the security footage of Preston swinging a fire axe at a nitrogen pipe. And, most damning of all, they had the testimony of the fixer who had cut a plea deal the moment the police handcuffs clicked shut. Madeline attended only the final day. She sat in the back row, occupying the same seat Sebastian Cole had taken during her divorce hearing. It was a deliberate choice. She wore a white suit, looking like a ghost haunting the man who had tried to erase her. When the verdict was read, guilty on 12 counts, including corporate espionage, arson, and reckless endangerment, Preston didn't weep. He scanned the room, his eyes locking onto hers. He opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, perhaps to curse her, but Madeline simply stood up, checked her watch, and walked out before the judge could even bang the gavel. She had a board meeting at 2. She didn't have time for his sentencing. 1 year later, the transition from scorned wife to industry titan wasn't overnight, but it was relentless. Under the banner of eco-logistics, Madeline didn't just patch the code, she evolved it. She spent 12-hour days in the glass-walled office that overlooked Central Park, often with Sebastian working silently at the desk opposite her. They had a strange rhythm, the two of them. There were no grand declarations of love, no candlelit dinners. Their intimacy was found in the quiet exchange of ideas, in the way Sebastian would hand her a coffee exactly when her energy flagged, or the way Madeline would correct his risk assessments with a single raised eyebrow. They were two predators who had decided it was more efficient to hunt together. Tonight was the culmination of that partnership. The annual Global Tech Innovators Gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Denda was bathed in soft, ethereal blue light, the signature color of the new Echo brand. Madeleine stood at the podium. The crowd before her was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, faces that had once looked through her as if she were furniture. Now, they hung on her every breath. For a long time, I believed that value was determined by volume, Madeleine said, her voice amplified clearly through the vast stone hall. I thought that if I wasn't shouting, I wasn't leading. I let others speak for me, because I thought my silence was a defect. She paused, looking down at Sebastian, who was standing in the front row. He held her gaze, his expression unreadable to everyone but her. But I learned that silence is not empty, she continued. Silence is where the code is written. Silence is where the strategy is formed. And while the loud men of the world are busy announcing what they intend to do, the quiet ones have already done it. We often mistake noise for power. Tonight, we celebrate the quiet efficiency of things that simply work. The applause was thunderous, a physical wave of sound that washed over her. It was validation, pure and absolute. As she stepped off the stage, Sebastian was waiting to intercept her. He guided her away from the reporters and the well-wishers, steering her toward a private viewing balcony that overlooked the gala. You went off script, Sebastian noted, handing her a glass of vintage champagne. The script was too safe, Madeleine replied, taking a sip. I'm done playing it safe. I noticed. Sebastian reached into his jacket pocket. Since we are discarding scripts, I decided to amend our contract. Happy anniversary, Madeleine. Anniversary? She frowned. We aren't married, Sebastian. The anniversary of the day you walked into that diner and sold me your life's work for $1. I brought you a return on your investment. He handed her a frame. It was heavy, made of black steel and glass. Inside, mounted on velvet, was the original check he had written her. Von Tulzosmos Ors. Madeleine laughed, the sound bright and genuine. You framed it. I was going to cash this eventually, you know. I figured I'd buy a gumball. Turn it over, Sebastian said softly. Madeleine flipped the frame. On the back of the check, where an endorsement signature usually went, Sebastian had written a paragraph in his sharp, angular handwriting. It was dated the same day as the check, a year ago. To be executed upon the realization of her full potential, a transfer of 50% of the equity of Vanguard and Blackwood Capital to Madeleine Vance. I do not buy brilliance. I partner with it. Madeleine froze. She read the words twice. Vanguard and Blackwood. Not just the logistics company, his entire empire, the private equity firm, the real estate holdings, everything. Sebastian, she whispered, looking up at him. This is half of everything you own. Why? Because I knew, he said, stepping closer, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. That day in the diner, I saw someone who could burn the world down if she wanted to. I wanted to make sure that when you built it back up, you did it with me. I didn't save you, Madeleine. I just made sure I had a front row seat to your rise. Madeleine looked at the check, then at the man. She realized then that this was the most romantic gesture a man like Sebastian was capable of. He wasn't offering her protection, he was offering her equality. I accept, she said, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. But be warned, partner. I have some ideas about restructuring the Asia division. Sebastian clinked his glass against hers. I'm counting on it. Epilogue. The Karma. 300 miles north, in the bowels of the Otisville Federal Correctional Institution, inmate 8940G was having a very different evening. Preston Galloway had aged 10 years in the last 12 months. His hair was thinning, his skin sallow from the fluorescent lights, and the lack of sunlight. He had been assigned to the laundry detail, the lowest rung of the prison labor hierarchy, usually reserved for the inmates nobody liked. "Hey, Galloway!" a guard barked, kicking the metal doorframe. "Wake up. We got a new shipment of industrial units. You're on installation duty. Get these hooked up before lights out." Preston groaned, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. "What kind of units?" "Top of the line. Smart tech. Supposed to save the taxpayer money on water and power. Get moving." The guard wheeled in a massive, gleaming stainless steel washing machine. It was sleek, futuristic, and hummed with a quiet, terrifying efficiency. Preston knelt down to connect the water hose. As he did, the control panel lit up. A soft blue LED pulsed to life, illuminating the dim concrete room. There, embossed in chrome on the front of the machine, was the logo. Echo Logistics, powered by the Vance algorithm. Preston froze. He stared at the name. Vance. It wasn't enough that she had taken his house. It wasn't enough that she had taken his money. She was here, inside the walls, staring back at him from the appliance he was forced to service for 12 cents an hour. "What's the hold-up, Galloway?" the guard yelled. "Nothing," Preston whispered, his voice cracking. "Just nothing." He picked up his wrench and began to tighten the bolt on his ex-wife's machine, the soft blue light reflecting in his eyes, reminding him with every silent spin that while he was scrubbing stains, she was scrubbing him from history. And that is the story of how Madeline Vance turned her silence into the loudest victory in corporate history. Preston thought he could bury her, but he forgot that she was a seed. This story reminds us that true power isn't about arrogance or noise. It's about knowing your worth and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Madeline didn't just get revenge, she built a legacy, while Preston ended up servicing the very machines she created, the ultimate poetic justice. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, genius, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done in Madeline's shoes? Would you have accepted the partnership with Sebastian or taken the money and run? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.